The H stand for in the HNLP?
Well, the actual word is humanistic, but it kind of stands for more than that for me. I would say in the late 80s, early 90s, one of the things that I started to get interested in was people would come to NLP trainings and then they would get to a certain point and they'd say, okay, so NLP is all about possibility. If the world is about possibility, then what's beyond NLP? And if you looked back at most of the kind of important trainers in that era, kind of the first generation NLP trainers, almost every single one of them had some interest in a spiritual system or something else that was kind of a source of inspiration for them. And see, for me back then, the big bridge was quantum mechanics and using quantum physics metaphors to kind of bridge what I would call traditional psychology that I'd still fit NLP into, and kind of bridge that to stuff that would be maybe more spiritual, so that I wouldn't have to teach overtly spiritual stuff because that's not really my thing. But what we could do is we could really start to talk about I would say really mind-blowing kinds of metaphors about, like the one that, that I talk about all the time that I got onto because of quantum mechanics was all you are is change. And just the idea that everything, from the smallest subatomic particle all the way up to how our brains are wired, all of that is changing moment to moment. We don't even beat the same heartbeat moment to moment, which we can now measure. So for me, I was kind of looking for another science, if you will, to kind of take what we were doing beyond that. And that kind of combined with my background with, I had a lot of interest in Eastern philosophy and stuff when I was in college. That was kind of my minor, was philosophy. I always felt like that Buddhist psychology had a lot to offer. So when I kind of started combining all those things together, humanistic worked because it's a friendly term. It really comes from, it was called the third force in psychology. There was originally psychoanalysis, and then there was behaviorism, and then this came along, and this had more to do with people and people wanting to self-actualize. So the whole idea, if you've heard of Abe Maslow, that was kind of the whole idea, is this isn't just about fixing things that are broken, it's how can people actually self-actualize and become more of who they really are. And that was kind of the thing that attracted to me. Plus, it gave me kind of a container, I guess you could say, to put newer things that I was interested in, because that's kind of the thing, and we've talked about this. I think a lot of NLP these days is like going to a history class, and you're learning things that were really amazingly groundbreaking in 1976. But it's been a long time since then, and now with neuroscience especially, the explosion in that over about the last 15 years, it kind of points out where a lot of the things that traditional NLP talked about was really correct, but neuroscience kind of takes it even further. It kind of explains other possibilities, I guess you would say. And it also shows in some cases where the NLP field was actually not quite on the mark. So for me, it's really in the most global sense, it's how mind creates perception or creates reality, and kind of doing it in a very applied kind of way. So I'm kind of like, if you can't come up with a really good application in a training that people can go out and use, then I'd rather just not teach that stuff. It's got to be applied, it's got to be field tested, it's got to be something that I've used on myself and that I've done with lots and lots and lots of people before I'm going to say, okay, let's teach this as part of that body of knowledge.
And people might, think, so how can I use the HNLP in not just my business, but also maybe privately, right?
Yeah.
So if you're to define the two differences, like we have therapist or private use, and then we have business. Mm-hmm. How would you apply that to those two different worlds?
Well, I mean, see, the main thing, what's been really important to me, because I was trained as a psychotherapist, so that was always my background. People came to see me, they expected me to do therapy type things. And when I got more involved in the coaching field, that's when I started to get to the point where I thought, okay, I don't really want this to just look like I'm doing therapy. I want to find ways to make it more conversational. So it was really coaching, and then all of the stuff inside of HNLP, which originally we called the HNLP coaching model, that really made it for me, because it was, if you can't do it conversationally, if you can't do it in a boardroom, if you can't stand next to somebody at a water cooler and have a conversation if they want to change or if there's something they want to do, then for me, there's always another level of competence that we can reach. So for me, the main difference really is the ability to be more conversational and using language to shift people's attention in the direction of where they would benefit from, rather than where they might have habits of attention which they just keep paying attention to the same problem over and over and over again. And the modern neuroscience basically suggests that in neuroplasticity, that any thought that we have, if we keep thinking the same thought or same collection of thoughts, that part of our brain becomes more muscular. And so then we end up creating a bully on the block. So now we got like this really muscular part of our brain that's like the baddest part of our brain that we'd ever want to be a bully. But the good news is we can reverse the same process, because if we can get the person to change their habit of attention and shift their attention to other things, and be able to wire it in, so to speak, so that it's automatic, then the part that was the bully, that part of the brain actually literally atrophies. It shrinks. And another part of the brain, which is, let's say in this case, the more positive attributes, actually starts to get stronger, because our brain is much more, our neurons are much more like the muscles in our body than anybody ever thought. It's almost a one-to-one relationship. If you think about training muscles in your body, it works the same way in our brain. And there's lots of evidence with PET scans and stuff like that to back that up now.
I know you spend so much time developing and really going into depth with all the techniques, and you're still developing through thousands of clients and hundreds of students. What can still amaze you, or what gets you really surprised by your own work still?
Seeing people change like that sometimes, like just seeing that moment. For example, yesterday here, and we did a values elicitation, which is kind of a traditional NLP kind of thing. And I was just showing you and a bunch of other people some other ways of doing it, and we finally got to the demo to make the change. The thing that amazes me is, like, after we did the technique to make the change, the subject, the client, was able to go through a brand new list of values, just pulled right out of his head within seconds. And they were completely aligned. There were no negative emotions attached with any of the values like there were before. The highest one was the most abstract. All these things that we look for to make sure that it's a good job. And I think to myself, when I see something like that, I think to myself, okay, if all of us sat down together and we actually tried with our left brain, our conscious minds, to write a list of values that would be completely clean and each one would fit the way it's supposed to fit and interlock, it would probably take us days to do that. And you see a person make a change like that, and a complete reorganization of their personal history, a complete reorganization of even seen in their physiology, in a matter of minutes. And I mean, that always will get me up in the morning, and then for me, kind of the humanistic angle, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday. For me, the idea of it in a humanistic training is, what we're trying to do is not just make it front to back, where it's like a teacher kind of presenting and lecturing. To me, the teacher's job really is to create a process with the group. So the group becomes its own resource state in a way, and people get to places they could never get to if it was just a kind of a standard teacher-student relationship. So to me, that's the other really big piece, is if you can create a process in the group, now you've increased the intensity and the impact and the transformation tenfold, because you've got all these other minds that are involved in the process the way they are.
Have you ever had a situation where you thought to yourself, like, maybe this is the place I cannot use HNLP? Or is it actually not just applicable to kind of whatever you're doing? Skills in communication, skills in knowing yourself, business.
I mean, you can use different names for it, but at the end of the day, yeah. I mean, I can't really think. I mean, to me, if you can't embody what you're teaching, it probably means you've outgrown the model. It doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the model. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the person. It just might be that for some people, it's not their cup of tea. Like, coming at a certain angle, maybe the way that I have. But for me, it's the little things, I think, in life that, that are even inside of NLP that, or HNLP, either one, that make kind of the biggest difference. Like just things like, like if you're in a relationship and whether it's with an intimate person or whether it's a business person or something like that, to really go ask yourself, okay, what's my real purpose here in being the way that I am? What's the real, what am I really going, and does my behavior really support that? Just something that small where you can learn to stop yourself and go, wait a minute. Yeah, my intention's good, but the way I'm going about it, it's like it's not working. So should I just keep doing what I'm doing, or should I figure out something that's more aligned with what my real purpose is when I'm talking to that person? And it's that kind of stuff that, to me, is so much more useful for a person in everyday life. And see, in a training context, the thing that's cool is that because it's an intensive experience that people would be having with you, there's things like that the best way I can put it is get wired in through repetition from being in the training. And that if they try to do it just on their own in kind of a self-help kind of way, while it's possible, you have to have a certain amount of discipline to do enough of the repetition to be able to have that stuff start to happen automatically in your life. And to me, that really is the value of the training. Because, well, do you know how long you're thinking about doing your training? Like just roughly in terms of days?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I haven't decided. Maybe modules, two big chunks, or maybe I'd rather just one big chunk.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm saying, whether it's 8 days or 12 days or whatever a person does, see, to me, most people would not dedicate, they wouldn't sit at home and go, okay, for the next 8 days, I'm going to learn this body of knowledge all by myself. And even if they did, they're not going to get to the same place that they would if they take a real training. Because they're not going to get the practice with other people. If they run in and hit kind of a speed bump along the way, they're not going to necessarily know what to do about that. So then they could end up kind of learning habits that don't really serve them in the long run. So to me, that's kind of the other really big thing is it's the little things that make the difference, I think, in everyday life. But sometimes it's a little too much to expect that people are always going to have the discipline to develop these things completely on their own with no other support from anybody or anything like that. And that, to me, that's the purpose of training.
And you kind of briefly talked about it right now. When people ask me, so what, the Overdurf training, what is it? Right? And I say, well, it's not an ordinary training. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts behind the way you teach trainers, people to become trainers of the HNLP? I know you have some not just levels of how to teach it, but there's so much thought into it. It's kind of like a philosophy, to me it is. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts about what is it that you want your trainers to be able to do so they go out of the box of ordinary?
Yeah. Well, be themselves. That's the main thing. It's really, how can you get a person in a place in the right kind of state where they can be truly who they are in front of a group? Because see, that's always going to be your advantage, because if people put so much of an emphasis on modeling other people and stuff, and while that's kind of helpful in the beginning because it's kind of like training wheels and it gives you a direction to go in, you're never going to be as good as that person at being them because they're them. So to me, it's really about if the world hasn't seen HNLP or NLP through Martin's filters, then they haven't seen it through Martin's filters. They haven't seen it through your filters. And that's going to resonate, that's going to connect with certain people that it might not with other people. That's the one, to be who you are, really. And then the second one, you're right. I mean, I enjoy every aspect of this whole thing. I like the people the best, by far. So maybe that's the humanistic thing. But to me, it's like to be able to really think strategically and go, okay, what is the absolute best state or states for people to learn this particular piece of information that I'm going to teach them, or a certain technique? What's the best thing? What's the best state that they can be in to be able to use it when they leave? So the one thing that we're really doing is we're literally using HNLP and NLP as the same methodology for training as we would be for working one-on-one. It's like, how can we use all that stuff to create something different in the group? That at the end of the day, so that they're coherent, so, and when I say coherent, you've heard me use the metaphor with the laser. Compare like a 5-watt light bulb wouldn't even light this room, but a 2.3-watt laser you can shine from here to the moon and back. What's the difference? The waves are coherent. They're aligned. So to me, it's really about helping people find their own natural alignment within themselves, so that when they're teaching, it really seems a lot more effortless. It doesn't seem like they're working that hard, because you shouldn't be working that hard at being yourself. The idea is that should be the easy part, And I think whether other trainers agree with this or not, I resisted what I'm going to tell you. I totally resisted this thought for a lot of years. I used to always think, oh, it's all about the material. It's all about the material. And people are coming for the material and the information and the processes. And like it or not, whether they come for that reason or not, you are the messenger. And as Marshall McLuhan said way back in the 60s, the medium is the message. So if you're the medium, and the messenger, you can't separate yourself from the message. So it's really about that part of it too, that are you representative of what it is that you're teaching? And I do the exact, everybody goes, well, I have to get this right. What's the expression? He walks his talk, right? That's you have to be able to do that. I think it's the exact opposite. See, I think you should only talk your walk. I think you should only be teaching what you really feel right about teaching on the inside. And the benefit to students or people that come to the training is they get permission to be who they are. They get permission to be and to discover that they're much more than they thought that they were. And in that way they can make a truly unique contribution, because there's nobody else in the history of the universe that's ever going to be them in that body for this period in this life. So maybe if we all started acting more like that, and being that way, the world would change too.
Any last advice for people if they're kind of like just on the verge?
Well, they should go see you, because you're awesome. And I can say that as an informed person. I've watched you teach. You bring a really awesome skill set, besides all the stuff that we're teaching here in terms of NLP and HNLP. And I think that there's no person I think that's going to be always 100% sure when they go take a training, and that's part of the learning too. It's a little bit of a risk. It's certainly an investment, probably less than a risk than more than an investment. And I would say try it. You might like it. And if you do, your whole life might change. And if not, they have still furthered their evolution. Because if somebody would take a training with me, for example, and let's say they take a practitioner and they go, this was really good, but I just, I've really discovered this other thing. I've discovered this Native American stuff that I'm into now, or whatever it happens to be. And, and they go, so, I thank you for the experience, but I'm kind of done with this. And for me, that's great, because what's happened is they're still further down the road than they were before. Even if they say it's not my cup of tea, well then you can check that off the list, and then you don't have to waste your time on that anymore. So to me, I can't think though of a better set of skills for practitioner, and I can't remember if you were in the group when we were saying this yesterday. I think in terms of troubleshooting, in terms of being able to solve problems, in terms of being able to really see into what's happening in relationships or in reality, or how a person's brain works, I can't think of a better set of skills actually than the practitioner set. You can take it into virtually any other field, you name it. And with the filters that you learn at a training, you're going to come up with ideas. You're going to have ways of thinking about stuff that other people just aren't going to have. And to me, that's the value.